Sometimes the most profound love isn't the one that lasts forever. It's the one that teaches you how to heal and prepares your heart for the happiness you deserve. Jake was living his best, single life. His apartment was exactly how he wanted it, clean, quiet, and his own space. He had his morning coffee routine down to a science, knew exactly where everything belonged, and never had to worry about anyone else's mess. Life was simple, and he liked it that way. Then his college buddy Ryan called him on a Tuesday evening, sounding stressed and desperate. "Hey man, I know this is a huge favor, but my sister needs somewhere to stay for a few weeks. She's going through a rough patch and needs to get back on her feet. Would it be okay if she crashed at your place? She's really quiet and won't cause any trouble." Jake hesitated. He barely knew Ryan's sister. They'd met maybe twice at college parties years ago, and he remembered her as this shy girl who stayed in the corner with her friends. But Ryan sounded really worried, and Jake had that spare room he used for storing old furniture and keeping his exercise bike. "Yeah, okay. But just for a few weeks, right?" "Absolutely. Thanks, man. I owe you big time." 2 days later, she showed up at his door. Maya looked completely different from how he remembered her. She was thinner, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She carried one large suitcase in a backpack, and when she smiled at him, it didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you so much for letting me stay here," she said softly. "I know this is weird having a stranger in your space." Jake helped her carry her stuff upstairs. His apartment suddenly felt smaller with another person in it, but not in a bad way. Just different. Maya looked around like she was trying to memorize every detail, as if she couldn't quite believe she had somewhere safe to be. "You can have the spare room," Jake said, opening the door to reveal his collection of random furniture and boxes. "Sorry, it's kind of a mess. I can clear some space." Maya shook her head quickly. "The couch is fine. I don't want to put you out any more than I already am." But Jake couldn't let her sleep on his old, uncomfortable couch. He spent the next hour moving boxes into the living room and setting up the bed that had been buried under old college textbooks and winter clothes he never wore. Maya tried to help, but she moved carefully, like someone who was used to making themselves as small as possible. That first night, Jake ordered pizza and they sat at his small kitchen table, eating in comfortable silence. Maya was polite but distant, asking about his job and telling him she was looking for work. She mentioned she'd been staying with friends before this, bouncing from couch to couch for the past month. "What kind of work are you looking for?" Jake asked. "Anything, really. I used to work in retail, but..." She paused, picking at her pizza crust. "I just need something stable. Somewhere I can start over." After dinner, Maya insisted on doing the dishes. She washed them carefully, methodically, like it was important to do them perfectly. Jake noticed how she kept glancing toward the windows even though the curtains were closed. "I usually go to bed pretty early," she said when she finished. "I won't make any noise or anything." Jake nodded and showed her where the extra towels were, how to work the shower, and gave her a spare key. "Make yourself at home, really. Stay up as late as you want, watch TV, whatever." But Maya just smiled that same sad smile and disappeared into the spare room. Jake went to bed around 11, which was normal for him. He was just starting to fall asleep when he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. He figured Maya was getting water or something, so he didn't think much of it. Then his bedroom door opened slightly, and Maya's voice came through the darkness. "Jake, are you awake?" He sat up, immediately worried something was wrong. "Yeah, what's up? Are you okay?" Maya stood in his doorway wearing an oversized t-shirt that looked like it belonged to someone else. She was shivering, even though the apartment was warm. "I'm sorry to bother you," she whispered. I can't sleep. It's too quiet in there, and I keep thinking I hear things. Would it be weird if I just laid down here for a little while? I know it sounds crazy." Jake's heart did something strange when he saw how small she looked standing there, like she was ready to disappear if he said no. "Of course," he said, moving over to make room. "Come on." Maya slipped into the bed like she was afraid of taking up too much space. She curled up on the very edge, as far from Jake as possible while still being under the covers. "Thank you," she breathed. "I just need the warmth. Everything feels so cold lately." Jake didn't ask what she meant by that. He could sense there was a story there, something that explained the careful way she moved and the sadness in her eyes. But he also knew that some stories couldn't be rushed. Within minutes, Maya's breathing evened out and she finally seemed to relax. Jake lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering what he'd gotten himself into. He'd never been the type to take in strays, but something about Maya made him want to build walls around her, to create a safe space where she could figure out whatever she needed to figure out. As he finally drifted off to sleep, Jake realized his quiet, predictable life was about to become something entirely different, and surprisingly, he wasn't scared of that change. Maybe he'd been living too carefully, too alone. Maybe sometimes the best things happened when you opened your door to someone who needed shelter from whatever storm was chasing them. The next morning, Maya was gone before he woke up, like it had all been a dream. But the impression her head had left on his pillow was real, and so was the way his apartment felt different now that someone else was living in it. Jake woke up the next morning expecting Maya to mention what had happened. Maybe she'd be embarrassed or want to explain why she'd needed to sleep in his room, but when he walked into the kitchen, she was already dressed and ready to leave, sipping coffee from one of his mugs. "Good morning," she said with a small smile. "I made extra coffee. I hope that's okay." "Thanks," Jake said, pouring himself a cup. The coffee was perfect, exactly how he liked it, even though he'd never told her his preferences. Maya gathered her things and headed toward the door. "I'm going job hunting today. I'll be back late, so don't wait up or anything." And just like that, she was gone, leaving Jake wondering if the previous night had actually happened. But it happened again the next night, and the night after that. Maya would come home around 9 or 10, tired from walking around the city looking for work. They'd eat dinner together, usually something simple that Jake cooked or takeout they shared. She was always polite, always grateful, always asking if she could help with anything, but there was still that distance between them, like she was being the perfect house guest instead of just being herself. Then around midnight, Jake would hear those soft footsteps in the hallway. "Jake, I need your warmth." It was always the same quiet whisper, always the same careful way she'd slip into his bed and curl up on her side, as far from him as possible. Jake never asked questions. He'd just move over and let her settle in, listening as her breathing slowly became steady and peaceful. During the day, they barely touched. Maya was careful about personal space, always saying, "Excuse me," if they passed each other in the narrow hallway, always making sure she wasn't in his way. But at night in the darkness, those boundaries disappeared. Not in a romantic way, but in something deeper. Like she trusted him enough to be vulnerable, to admit she needed something from another human being. Jake started changing his routine without really thinking about it. He bought softer sheets and an extra pillow. He made sure his bedroom was always tidy, not messy like he usually kept it. He started going to bed earlier, not because he was tired, but because he wanted to be there when Maya needed him. After a week of this pattern, Maya finally found a job at a small diner downtown. The work was hard, she told him, standing on her feet for 8 hours serving coffee and burgers to truckers and late-night workers. But she seemed relieved to have something steady, somewhere to go during the day. "The manager is nice," Maya said one evening as they shared Chinese takeout, "and the other waitresses have been there for years. It feels safe." Jake noticed how often Maya used that word. Safe. Like it was something she hadn't felt in a long time. The job meant Maya came home even more exhausted than before. She'd barely have energy to eat dinner before falling asleep on the couch watching old movies on TV. But still, every night around midnight, she'd wake up and make her way to Jake's room. "I'm sorry I keep bothering you," she whispered one night as she settled under the covers. "You're not bothering me," Jake said, and he meant it. He'd started looking forward to these quiet moments, to being the person Maya turned to when the world felt too big and cold. One night, Maya came home with a small bag from the pharmacy. "I got some sleeping pills," she said, showing him the bottle. "Maybe if I take these, I can sleep in my own room and stop disturbing you." Something about that made Jake's chest tight. "You don't disturb me, really." Maya looked at him like she was trying to figure out if he was just being polite. "But this can't be normal for you. Having someone in your bed every night who isn't, Jake realized she was right. It wasn't normal, but somehow it felt more natural than sleeping alone had ever felt. He'd grown used to the sound of her breathing, the way she'd sometimes mutter in her sleep, the warmth of having another person nearby. "Don't take the pills yet," he said. "Not unless you really want to." Maya didn't take the sleeping pills that night, or any night after that. Instead, their routine deepened. Maya would come to his room and they'd lie there in the comfortable darkness, sometimes talking quietly about their days, sometimes just existing in the peaceful silence. Jake learned that Maya had grown up moving from place to place with her mom, never staying anywhere long enough to feel settled. She'd learned to pack light and not get attached to places or people. "That's why this is so weird for me," she admitted one night. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to get tired of having me here." "I'm not going to get tired of you," Jake said, and in the darkness it felt safe to be that honest. Maya was quiet for a long time. Then, so softly he almost missed it, she said, "No one's ever just let me be broken before. Everyone always wants to fix me or give advice or tell me I should be stronger." Jake understood then that what Maya needed wasn't solutions or pep talks. She needed space to heal at her own pace and someone patient enough to let her do it without judgment. Their nighttime ritual became sacred to both of them. It was the one time Maya could admit she needed help, and the one time Jake could offer something that actually mattered. Neither of them talked about what it meant or where it was leading. They just accepted it as something good in both their lives, something worth protecting. 2 months passed like this, and Jake's life had completely changed without him really noticing. His apartment felt like home in a way it never had before. There were Maya's books on the coffee table, her favorite tea in the kitchen cabinet, and her laugh echoing through rooms that used to be silent. Maya had gotten comfortable enough to leave little traces of herself around. A hair tie on the bathroom counter, her work shoes by the front door, her jacket thrown over the back of a chair. Jake found himself smiling at these small signs of her presence throughout his day. At work, people started noticing changes in Jake. His coworker Tyler mentioned that he seemed calmer, more patient during stressful meetings. When deadlines got crazy, Jake didn't lose his temper like he used to. "You're different lately," Tyler said during their lunch break. "More, centered." "Are you seeing someone?" Jake didn't know how to answer that. Was he seeing Maya? They lived together, shared meals, and she slept in his bed every night. But they'd never even held hands. They existed in this strange, beautiful space between friendship and something deeper, something that didn't have a name. "It's complicated," Jake finally said, which made Tyler grin and assume there was some dramatic love story happening. If only it were that simple. The truth was much more subtle. Maya was healing, slowly and quietly, and Jake was learning things about himself he'd never known, like how much he enjoyed taking care of someone, how good it felt to be needed and trusted. He'd always thought of himself as independent, someone who didn't need anybody. But having Maya there made him realize he'd been lonely without knowing it. Maya started opening up more during their evening conversations. Little pieces of her story came out gradually, never forced, just shared when she felt ready. She told him about her ex-boyfriend, Danny, who'd started out charming and sweet but gradually became controlling and mean, how he'd convinced her that she couldn't handle life without him, that no one else would ever understand her the way he did. "He made me feel like I was crazy," Maya said one night, her voice barely above a whisper in the darkness, like my feelings weren't real or valid. "When I finally left, I didn't trust my own judgment about anything anymore." Jake felt angry on her behalf, but he kept his voice calm. "Your feelings are valid. They're yours." Maya also talked about her childhood, about a mom who worked multiple jobs and was always stressed about money. Her dad had left when she was 10, and Maya blamed herself for years, thinking maybe if she'd been a better daughter, he would have stayed. "I learned early that I needed to be invisible," she said. "That taking up space or asking for things just caused problems." That explained so much about how Maya moved through the world, always apologizing, always trying to make herself smaller. It broke Jake's heart, but it also made him more determined to show her that she deserved to take up space, to ask for what she needed. Their nighttime routine had evolved too. Maya still came to his room every night, still whispered that she needed his warmth, but she wasn't quite as careful about staying on her side of the bed anymore. Sometimes Jake would wake up and find her closer to the middle, her hand almost touching his arm, her breathing soft and peaceful in a way that told him she felt truly safe. Jake had started sleeping better too. He'd always been a light sleeper, waking up at every little sound. But with Maya there, he slept deeply and dreamlessly, like his brain finally felt permission to fully rest. One evening, Maya came home from work looking especially tired. The diner had been busy, and she'd dealt with some difficult customers who'd left her feeling drained. Some people are just mean for no reason, she said, slumping onto the couch. This guy kept complaining about everything, making jokes about how stupid I must be for working there. His friends thought it was hilarious. Jake felt that familiar protective anger rise in his chest. That says nothing about you and everything about what a miserable person he is. Maya smiled, but it was sad. I know that. In my head, I know that. But it's hard not to let it get under my skin sometimes. That night, Maya seemed especially fragile when she came to his room. She curled up under the covers and was quiet for a long time. Jake could sense she was thinking about something but didn't want to push her to talk. Jake, she finally said, yeah? Why are you so kind to me? I mean, really. You don't even know me that well, and you've let me completely take over your life. Jake thought about how to answer that. The truth was he did know her. Maybe not the basic facts about her life, but he knew the important things. He knew she was brave and resilient and deserved so much more than the world had given her so far. He knew she was funny and smart and had this way of noticing small, beautiful things that other people missed. I know you better than you think, he said, and what I know is that you're worth taking care of. Maya was quiet for so long that Jake thought she might have fallen asleep. Then she spoke, her voice thick with emotion. I've never had anyone just believe in me before, without wanting something back. Jake's heart ached for her, for all the people who'd failed to see how special she was. Well, now you do. After 3 months, Maya had saved enough money to start looking for her own place. She mentioned it casually one evening while they were making dinner together. I think I can afford a small studio apartment now, she said, stirring the pasta sauce. There are a few places I want to look at this weekend. Jake's stomach dropped, but he forced himself to sound supportive. That's great. You must be excited to have your own space again. Maya nodded, but she didn't look excited. She looked uncertain, maybe even scared. That night, their routine felt different. Maya came to his room as usual, but she seemed restless, like something was bothering her. Are you okay? Jake asked. Maya sighed. I keep thinking about moving out, and part of me is excited. But part of me is terrified. What if I can't sleep without this? What if I'm not as ready as I think I am? Jake wanted to tell her she could stay as long as she needed, that he'd never ask her to leave. But he also knew that Maya needed to feel capable of standing on her own. That part of healing meant learning to be okay alone. You're stronger than you think, he said instead. But there's no rush. You can take as much time as you need to feel ready. Spring arrived early that year, and with it came changes that neither Jake nor Maya were prepared for. The apartment felt different with longer daylight hours streaming through the windows, making everything seem more real, more exposed than it had during the dark winter months. Maya had been looking at apartments for 2 weeks, but something always went wrong. Either the place was too expensive, too far from her job, or just didn't feel right. Jake suspected she was sabotaging her own apartment hunt, but he didn't say anything. Deep down, he wasn't ready for her to leave either. Their routine had become so natural that Jake couldn't imagine his life without it. He'd wake up every morning with Maya already gone, her side of the bed still warm, and spend his day looking forward to evening when she'd come home with stories from the diner. Then night would come, and she'd appear in his doorway with that same soft whisper, and everything would feel complete again. But something was building between them, a tension that neither of them wanted to acknowledge. Jake caught himself watching Maya more during their dinner conversations, noticing the way her eyes lit up when she laughed, how she unconsciously tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. And sometimes he'd catch her looking at him too, with an expression he couldn't quite read. One evening, Maya came home more upset than usual. A group of college kids had come into the diner and been particularly cruel, making fun of her accent and leaving a mess on purpose. One of them had grabbed her wrist when she was clearing their table, not letting go until she pulled away hard enough to spill water everywhere. I feel so stupid for letting it bother me, Maya said, sitting on the couch with her knees pulled up to her chest. It's just a job. Those people don't matter. Jake sat beside her, closer than usual. It's not stupid. What they did was wrong, and you have every right to be upset about it. Maya looked at him with tears in her eyes. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel normal again. Like, will I always be this person who gets scared by every little thing? Will I always need... She gestured toward his bedroom, unable to finish the sentence. There's nothing wrong with needing comfort, Jake said. There's nothing wrong with any of this. That night felt different from the moment Maya walked into his room. Instead of her usual whisper, she stood in the doorway for a long moment, just looking at him. The moonlight coming through the window made everything seem dreamlike, suspended between what was real and what was possible. "Jake," she said, and his name sounded different in her voice. Not desperate or fragile like usual, but something else entirely. "What is it?" Maya walked slowly toward the bed, but instead of immediately getting under the covers, she sat on the edge and looked down at her hands. "I keep thinking about what happens when I move out," she said, "about how we'll go back to being strangers who used to live together. And I don't want that." Jake's heart started beating faster.
"What do you want?"
Maya turned to look at him, and in her eyes was a question she'd been carrying for weeks. "I want to know if this means something to you too. If I'm not the only one who feels like we've become something more than just roommates." Jake sat up, suddenly very aware of how close they were, how the space between them felt charged with possibility. "Maya, I know it's complicated," she continued quickly. "I know I came here broken and needy, and maybe this is just me being grateful or confused. But sitting here with you every night, talking in the dark, feeling safe for the first time in years, I think I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air between them like something fragile and precious. Jake reached out without thinking, touching her face gently with his fingertips. "You're not confused," he said quietly, "and you're not just grateful. I've been falling in love with you too. But I was afraid to say anything because I didn't want to pressure you or make you feel like you owed me something." Maya leaned into his touch, and for a moment Jake thought this was it. This was when everything would change. When they'd crossed the line they'd been walking for months, but then Maya pulled back, her expression suddenly uncertain. "What if this ruins everything?" she whispered. "What if we try to be more than this and it falls apart? Then I'll lose the one good thing in my life." Jake understood her fear because he felt it too. What they had was precious and perfect in its own way. Adding romance to it could change everything, maybe even destroy it. "We don't have to decide anything tonight," he said. "We can just see what happens." Maya nodded and slipped under the covers, but this time she didn't retreat to her usual spot on the far side of the bed. She moved closer, close enough that Jake could feel her warmth against his side, close enough that when she reached out in the darkness, her fingers found his. They lay there holding hands, both awake, both thinking about the conversation they'd just had and what it might mean for their future. Jake could feel Maya's pulse in her wrist, quick and uncertain, matching his own racing heart. "Jake?" Maya's voice was barely audible. "Yeah? Thank you for not pushing, for letting me figure this out at my own pace." "Always," Jake said, and meant it. But even as he said it, Jake knew something fundamental had shifted between them. The innocent comfort they'd shared was evolving into something deeper and more complex. They were balanced on the edge of a cliff, and they'd have to decide whether to step back to safety or take the leap together. The next morning, Maya left a note saying she needed a few days to think, that she was going to stay with her friend Katie to give them both some space. The note was carefully worded and kind, but Jake could read the fear between the lines. Maya was running just like she always did when things got too real, too close to happiness. Jake spent that first night alone staring at the ceiling, his bed feeling enormous and empty. He realized how much he'd changed over the past few months, how much of his identity had become tied up in being Maya's safe place. Without her there, he felt lost, purposeless. But he also understood why she needed space. Love was terrifying when you'd been hurt before, especially the kind of love that grew slowly and quietly in the dark, built on trust and vulnerability rather than passion and excitement. All Jake could do was wait and hope that Maya would realize what he already knew, that some risks were worth taking, especially when you'd found someone willing to catch you if you fell. Maya stayed away for 5 days, and each one felt like a month to Jake. He went through the motions of his normal routine, but everything felt off balance. He'd catch himself making 2 cups of coffee in the morning, or buying groceries for 2 people out of habit. His apartment felt too quiet, too empty, like something essential was missing. On the 3rd day, Katie called him. "She's miserable," Katie said without any introduction. "She sits on my couch staring at her phone like she wants to call you. But then she chickens out. She's convinced she's going to ruin the best thing that ever happened to her." Jake gripped the phone tighter. "What do you think I should do?" "Nothing," Katie said, which surprised him. "Maya needs to figure this out on her own. She spent her whole life having other people make decisions for her, or tell her what she should feel. This has to be her choice." Jake knew Katie was right, but it didn't make the waiting any easier. On the 5th day, Maya came back. Jake heard her key in the door around dinner time and his heart jumped into his throat. She walked into the kitchen where he was heating up leftover Chinese food, looking nervous and uncertain. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," Jake replied, trying to keep his voice normal. "Are you hungry? There's plenty of food." Maya nodded and sat at the kitchen table while Jake got her a plate. They ate in careful silence, both of them dancing around the conversation they needed to have. Finally, Maya put down her fork and looked at him directly. "I found an apartment," she said. "It's small, but it's nice. And it's available next week." Jake felt his heart sink, but he kept his expression neutral. "That's great. I'm happy for you." Maya bit her lip, the way she always did when she was trying to find the right words. "I've been thinking about what we talked about the other night. About us, and what this all means." Jake waited, not trusting himself to speak. "I realized something while I was at Katie's," Maya continued. "I was so afraid of ruining what we have that I was about to throw it away completely." "That doesn't make any sense." She took a deep breath like she was gathering courage. "I don't know how to be in love with someone," she said honestly. "I don't know how to trust that you won't leave or change your mind about me. But I know that what we have is real, and I know that I'd rather take the risk of it not working out than live my whole life wondering what could have been." Jake reached across the table and took her hand. "Maya, I'm not going anywhere. Whatever happens between us, whatever we decide to try or not try, I'm not going to disappear from your life." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "How can you promise that? People leave all the time." "Because I know what it's like to live without you now," Jake said simply. "And I never want to do that again, no matter what form our relationship takes." That night, Maya came to his room one last time as his roommate. But this time when she whispered that she needed his warmth, it sounded different, less desperate, more like a choice she was making because she wanted to, not because she had to. They lay in the darkness talking about practical things, when Maya would move her stuff, how often they'd see each other, whether they were ready to try dating properly or if they needed more time. But underneath all the logistics was the understanding that they were choosing each other, consciously and deliberately. "I want to try," Maya said finally. "I want to see if we can be more than this. But I need us to take it slow. As slow as you need," Jake promised. The next week was strange and bittersweet. Jake helped Maya move her things into her new studio apartment, which was bright and cheerful with plants on the windowsill, and her books arranged on floating shelves. It looked like Maya, like a place where she could build a new life. "It's perfect," Jake said, and he meant it. The apartment was Maya's first real step toward independence, toward believing she could take care of herself. "It feels weird to have my own space again," Maya admitted. Good weird, but still weird. They went on their first official date the following weekend. Dinner at a small Italian restaurant, followed by a walk through the park where they'd talked for hours like they used to in Jake's bedroom, but with the city lights around them instead of darkness. It was different being together in public, having to navigate the normal awkwardness of early dating when they already knew each other so intimately in other ways. But it was good different, like they were building something new on the foundation of what they'd already created. Maya slept at her own apartment that night, and Jake slept alone for the first time in months. It felt strange but not wrong, like they were both learning how to be whole people separately so they could choose to be together. 3 months later, Jake ran into Maya at a coffee shop downtown. She was sitting with a man Jake didn't recognize, laughing at something he'd said. When she saw Jake, her face lit up with genuine happiness. "Jake!" she called out, waving him over. "This is Ben, my boyfriend. Ben, this is Jake, my very good friend." Jake shook Ben's hand, taking in his kind eyes and the way he looked at Maya like she was the most interesting person in the room. Maya looked different too, more confident, more settled in her own skin. "Maya's told me so much about you," Ben said warmly. "Thank you for being such a good friend to her when she needed it most." After Ben excused himself to take a phone call, Maya grabbed Jake's arm. "Are we okay?" she asked quietly. "I know this is probably weird, but I needed you to meet him. He's important to me, and you're important to me, and I want the important people in my life to know each other." Jake smiled, surprised by how genuinely happy he felt for her. "We're more than okay. He seems like a good guy." "He is," Maya said, her face glowing. "He's patient and kind, and he makes me feel safe without making me feel helpless, you know? He reminds me of you in some ways. Over coffee, Maya told Jake about her life. She'd been promoted to shift manager at the diner and was taking night classes in business. She and Ben had been together for 6 weeks, and she was cautiously optimistic about their future. "I never thanked you properly," Maya said as they were getting ready to leave, "for giving me a safe place to figure myself out, for showing me what kindness looks like without strings attached." Jake hugged her goodbye, and it felt natural and right. "You don't need to thank me. We helped each other." As Jake walked home, he thought about love and all its different forms. What he and Maya had shared was real and meaningful, even though it hadn't turned into the traditional love story either of them might have expected. They'd given each other exactly what they needed at exactly the right time, and that was its own kind of miracle. Jake's apartment was quiet when he got home, but it was a comfortable quiet now, not the lonely silence it used to be. He'd learned how to be alone without being lonely, how to build a life that was full and meaningful, even when it wasn't shared with someone else every single day. Some nights, he still left the lamp on low before going to sleep. Not because he was waiting for someone, but because it reminded him that he was the kind of person who could offer shelter when someone needed it, and maybe someday someone else would need his warmth the way Maya had, and he'd be ready to give it freely once again.